In the Netherlands, it's getting better and better every day, actually, because more younger people drinking malt whiskey.
Yeah. Especially the higher quality whiskies.
Yep.
Holland, I think for the last 20 or 15 years, knows really a whiskey culture, starting with single malt whiskies, with the Glenfiddich and whiskies like that. But nowadays, really the highest quality, the single cask, the single malts, and the whiskies that Adelphi bottles really are very popular. Even though the prices are quite high, but people tend to buy these higher priced whiskies.
And do you notice do people favour a particular style of whiskey?
Well, I do. We do. We are just whiskey lovers, and came to import the independent bottlers like Adelphi as whiskey lovers. So everything we buy, we taste ourselves, and we buy like whiskey lovers. And for us, really whiskies with a lot of taste in it, which the whiskey should have a taste explosion on your taste buds, in your mouth and on your tongue. That's the most important thing. And whether it's peaty or it's fruity or whatever, I don't think that's really a divide. It just makes people want to drink more of it.
I mean, Sweden is such a dynamic malt whisky market. They caught onto malt whisky before anywhere else, really, certainly before Britain. And I travel a lot around the world with Blackadder, and that's with Adelphi. Blackadder has importers in a number of countries. So you get to experience the different markets, but nowhere is there as much knowledge as in Sweden. There's some 500 whisky clubs, and I go to anywhere in Scotland where there's whisky being distilled and look at the different nationalities going round. You'll count more Swedes than you will Germans or Dutch or French or English.
Why do you suppose that is?
I think they really appreciate the better things in life far more. They're not people to complain about, oh, this is really expensive, or I don't know whether I can afford this. When they become more seriously interested in whisky, then they're not drinking for the sake of drinking alcohol, they're drinking for quality. And it's a fact that if you're giving someone an unfiltered single cask whisky that has been selected and you're pretty happy with what you put in the bottle, then I think the Swede is the customer that's going to appreciate that and will drink for quality rather than for quantity, and they're not afraid to pay the money for what they want.
Yeah, the whiskey market in Austria is not very big. We are a small country, 8 million people. And we are always a little bit late when we get the new developments all over the things in the world. But the whiskey market is growing, slowly growing, but it's growing, and people get a lot of interest in special products like Adelphi. And they are very interested, of course, a little bit like the Germans, in the Islay whiskies.
Yeah, yeah. And they're trading up high quality whiskies. They like the high quality malt whiskies.
Yeah, they start with the basics, like, you know, and then they get interested. A lot of people get interested in single casks and cask strength whiskies, and they're really well informed at the moment.
When did the Swedish market really begin to take off, would you say?
I would say the late 1980s. I mean, you have to remember that malt whisky as a market never really existed until the mid-1980s did it really begin. I mean, the introduction of Cardew by, it was DCL, wasn't it, in those days, I think it was 1983. The quotes classic malts followed about 1985, 86. And okay, you know, we had things like Lefroy, Glenmorangie, Glenlivet, etc. And obviously Glenfiddich available, but this whole sort of sudden blossoming of malts out into the various markets started in the late 80s, and they began to realise it in Sweden pretty quickly. But when I was first going to Sweden and first introduced Blackadder into Sweden, which was 1996, There were very, very little choice on the special order list and not so many whiskies on the main list at Systembolaget. But from about 1996 through to the beginning of the 2000s, that list expanded enormously, and we started off in Sweden taking in, after Blackadder, Douglas Lang whiskies, and we were gradually adding more of those, and then we began to import other whiskies to Sweden, such as Duncan Taylor, recently Compass Box, and now Adelphi. And I suppose we must be responsible for more than half of the whiskies on the special order list in Systembolaget. We're importing about 350 different malts into Sweden, and we started off importing maybe just 12 different Blackadder whiskies into Sweden. So that choice has grown enormously, and by having that choice it allows us to afford the warehousing and to pay someone to pack up these whiskies for making all these individual shop deliveries.
Mm. In New Zealand, the whisky consumer, fairly broad tastes, you know, but I think the overlying theme is quality. Whether it's the lower end or the higher end of the market, it's still quality. Big influence of the Islay whiskies at the moment are very, very in. A lot of peat freaks out there. But they're sophisticated palates. They've got a good wine palate. Certainly they know their food now. It's a very much a foodie country. And the next logical step is good single malt whiskies in the most, and that's what we specialise in.
And you've noticed an increase in demand?
The demand has been a huge increase over the last 3 or 4 years, to the point now where many of the companies are struggling to meet the demand, which is creating its own challenges. Yeah.
Well, that's a happy position for you to be in as the largest shop in the Antipodes.
Well, it is, and we hope that we can satisfy and get plenty more good whisky in for the folk in New Zealand. Yeah.